Welcome to this explainer. We're jumping right in to one of the most rapid and honestly terrifying technological evolutions in human history. We're talking about the birth of early gunpowder. It's the wild story of how humanity went from mixing up mythical potions all the way to launching high-velocity projectiles, a shift that permanently altered the landscape of global conflict. So here's the supreme historical irony, right? How did pacifist monks, people who literally dedicated their entire existence to seeking eternal life, accidentally invent the ultimate weapon of death? It's a staggering contradiction. And the answer reveals how the single most consequential chemical discovery in the history of human conflict happened completely by mistake. Okay, let's dive right into this. Part 1, the failed immortality potion. We're transporting ourselves back to the 9th century, deep into the remote mountains of China's Sichuan or Shaanxi provinces. Taoist alchemists were running experiments out there that had absolutely zero to do with warfare. They were trying to live forever. Eventually, they mixed up one particular batch with 3 specific ingredients: potassium nitrate, better known as saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur. And the magic ratio? Roughly 75 to 15 to 10 by weight. Now, when you combine these elements, the saltpeter acts as a rapid oxidizer, meaning when it heats up, it rapidly releases oxygen, feeding an incredibly fast combustion reaction. The result? A massive, violent expansion of gas. And well, instead of granting eternal life, that rapid expansion of gas did something way more dramatic. It exploded. The historical record actually notes this with some unintentional comedy, giving us accounts of singed beards and burned-down workshops. It is safe to say absolutely nobody in that alchemy lab was trying to invent a weapon. They were just trying not to get their eyebrows blown off. Because of those origins, they named this stuff Huo Yao, which translates to fire medicine. They basically viewed it as a failed pharmaceutical elixir. And for generations, this volatile mixture wasn't weaponized at all. People across China used it for celebratory fireworks, smoke signals, and festival entertainment. It was just a spectacle of light and noise, totally far removed from any military threat. But that purely decorative era eventually came to a sudden end in Part 2, the birth of the fire lance. Moving forward to the Song dynasty, between the 10th and 12th centuries, some clever military commanders saw these festival fireworks and realized this sudden, violent expansion of gas could actually solve some deadly problems in close quarters combat. So they created the Hu Qiang, or the fire lance. Think about an ordinary traditional spear, just a sharp stick requiring physical thrusting force. Now compare that to a bamboo fire lance. Engineers literally strapped a length of bamboo to the end of a spear, packed the tube with gunpowder, and lit it. Suddenly, you've got a polearm actively spewing flame and burning debris right at anyone within arm's reach. To see how this played out, let's look at the Siege of Dalian in 1132. Imagine you're an attacking soldier, desperately climbing a siege ladder to breach a city wall. Suddenly, the defenders at the top aren't just poking at you with wooden spears. They're plunging these bamboo tubes right into your face, unleashing blinding fire, scorching heat, and disorienting smoke. By every account, the fire lance worked exactly as intended. It absolutely crippled the climbing attackers. But the physical burns, they were really only half the battle. Think about the psychological shock out there on the medieval battlefield. You've got soldiers who spent their entire lives training to parry blades and block arrows. Suddenly, there's an enemy who has figured out how to harness and project pure fire itself. That kind of sheer, visceral terror mattered just as much as the actual physical damage the weapon inflicted. This whole dynamic, blades versus flame, proved that gunpowder was genuinely useful in actual combat. And we all know, once a technology proves itself on the battlefield, the pace of innovation accelerates at breakneck speed. Chinese craftsmen looked at the fire lance and realized there was a highly logical, but far more deadly, next step to take. Now, what's really interesting here is how a seemingly simple tweak fundamentally changed the nature of combat. Makers of the fire lance started stuffing pellets and jagged shards of pottery into the bamboo tubes right alongside the gunpowder. So when the weapon fired, it didn't just spew flame, it violently flung these small projectiles outward. This was a massive conceptual leap. It shifted the weapon from just a tool of intimidation and burning toward causing actual, penetrating physical injury delivered from a distance. Guys, this is the very foundation of every firearm that would follow. Which brings us to Part 3, upgrading to bronze cannons. You see, this rapid innovation hit a severe material limitation pretty quickly. Chemical innovation had fundamentally outpaced material science. As the military demanded way more powerful gunpowder charges to shoot these projectiles further and harder, the bamboo tubes just couldn't handle the pressure. The expanding gas would literally cause the bamboo to split or violently burst apart right in the user's hands, terribly injuring the soldier holding it. They desperately needed a stronger container. The solution? Metallurgy. Compare the fragility of bamboo to the immense strength of cast bronze. Once Chinese craftsmen figured out how to successfully cast bronze tubes strong enough to safely contain that massive internal pressure, material science finally caught up to chemistry. They solved the catastrophic failure rate of the bamboo lances. Bronze could hold the explosive force, forcing all of that expanding gas to push strictly forward, right out the front of the barrel. And this metallurgical breakthrough birthed the true hand cannon. By the 13th century, these metal-barreled weapons were in regular use all across China. This was a monumental technological leap. Instead of a random spray of pottery shards, a soldier could use the expanding gas from gunpowder combustion to launch a single, solid projectile with unprecedented force and range. The true firearm had officially entered the historical record, setting the stage for the weapons of the modern era.
Up next, Part 4, Siege Warfare Transformed.
Chinese military engineers didn't just stop at weapons you could hold in your hands. They took this exact same bronze casting technology and the physics of expanding gas, and they scaled the whole concept way up. Their goal? To obliterate the massive, previously impenetrable stone walls of medieval castles and fortresses. They started producing heavy ordnance with these incredibly descriptive names, like the thunderclap bomb and the heaven-shaking cannon. These weapons were capable of delivering genuinely high-yield, high-impact explosions right onto the battlefield. Fortifications that armies had previously considered totally unassailable were suddenly being reduced to rubble. Traditional siege warfare, which relied on starvation or wooden catapults, was rapidly becoming completely obsolete in the face of heavy bronze artillery. Bringing us to Part 5, the Mongol delivery system. This was a major turning point in the 1200s. When the Mongols invaded China, they didn't just hear about these weapons. They experienced this devastating firepower firsthand during sieges, like the famous defense of Kaifeng in 1232. But rather than simply retreating in defeat, the Mongols did what great empires do. They absorbed the new technology and made it their own. Consider how rapidly this moved. From the earliest fire lances at Durian in 1132 to the Mongols facing gunpowder exactly a century later in 1232. Once the Mongols conquered China and established the Yuan dynasty, they strapped these cannons and bombs to their horses and supply trains. As they pushed westward, carving out the largest contiguous land empire in history, they carried this gunpowder weaponry with them across Asia, toward the Islamic world, and eventually right to the doorstep of Europe by the late 13th century. So, the crucial takeaway here is that these Mongol military campaigns essentially functioned as a highly aggressive, totally accidental delivery system. Because of the sheer speed of their conquests, gunpowder knowledge was transported across enormous distances, far faster than any diplomatic exchanges or slow-moving merchant trade caravans ever could have managed. It was a massive cross-continental tech transfer driven entirely by warfare. As this knowledge spread westward, it's vital to note it didn't just travel in a single straight line toward the guns we know today. The technology branched. Along with hand cannons, Chinese engineers had also developed gunpowder-propelled rockets and fire arrows. These early military rockets traveled along their own overlapping trade routes into Korea, India, and eventually Europe, literally laying the ancient foundational groundwork for both modern military artillery rockets and, crazy enough, even space rocketry. Which brings us to our final, mind-bending thought for this explainer. Look at the immense global consequences we've traced today. From bamboo tubes to bronze siege cannons that shattered medieval castles, to a Mongol delivery system that reshaped the entire Eurasian balance of power, it all leads back to one massive question. How vastly different would our world be today if a few 9th century monks in a mountain lab had simply decided not to chase immortality? It's a fascinating reminder that some